Far past the edge of the old human maps, in the cold dark between stars, a Corvette patrol ship moved through space like a hunting shark. Its hull was smooth and gray, shaped like a curved blade. Inside, the crew watched their scanners with calm, practiced eyes. They were not looking for danger. They were looking for humans. For 40 years, the Corvette Dominion had followed one simple rule about humanity: find them and destroy them. No talking, no warning, no mercy. The order was called the Silence Edict, and every Corvette officer knew it by heart. Humans were seen as a plague, a species too wild and too unpredictable to be allowed to grow. The Dominion believed that if humans were left alone, they would spread like a sickness across the stars. So every human ship that was found, no matter how small, no matter if it carried soldiers or families, was destroyed on sight. On this day, the patrol ship found a target. It was a human freighter, old and slow, limping through space with a damaged engine. The ship was called the Hopeful Dawn, and it carried nothing but food supplies and 42 people trying to reach a hidden colony. The Corvette captain, a stiff and proud officer named Yulthith, did not hesitate. He gave the order, and 3 plasma torpedoes tore the freighter apart in seconds. There was no fight. There was no chance. The Hopeful Dawn became a cloud of burning metal and silence. Yulthith watched the wreckage on his screen without any feeling. To him, this was not murder. This was pest control. He wrote a short report for the Dominion Assembly, marked the sector as clear, and moved on. This was how it always went. It had gone this way for 4 decades, ever since the Corvette first found the human home system and decided that mankind was too dangerous to exist. But what Yulthith did not know, what no Corvette officer knew, was that humanity had not been sitting still, while the Dominion hunted every ship they could find. Deep in hidden systems far from any Corvette patrol route, humans had been building ships, building weapons, building something the Corvette had never imagined. Far away, in a system that had no name on any Corvette star chart, a massive hidden shipyard floated inside a cold asteroid belt. It was carved into rock and ice, hidden from sensors by old human tricks and stolen alien technology. Inside this shipyard, engineers and soldiers worked day and night. They were the last free humans, survivors of a disaster they simply called the Scattering. The Scattering had happened many years ago. Back then, humanity had colonies across dozens of star systems, bright and growing, full of hope. Then the Corvette found Earth. Within 2 years, most of the human colonies were burned to ash. Earth itself became a graveyard world. Its cities turned to rubble by orbital strikes. Billions died. The few humans who survived did not surrender. They ran. They scattered into the dark, hiding in places the Corvette would never think to look, in systems too small or too poor to be worth patrolling. For a while, all humanity could do was hide and mourn. But slowly, something changed. A small group of survivors managed to capture a wrecked Corvette warship after an ambush. Inside that wreck, human engineers found something incredible. Alien technology far more advanced than anything humanity had built before. Engines that could bend space, shields that could stop plasma fire, weapons that could cut through steel like paper. The humans studied it, learned from it, and began to build their own machines, using pieces of Corvette design, mixed with human stubbornness and creativity. It took years. It took the lives of good engineers who died from radiation leaks and failed experiments. It took every scrap of metal humanity could find in the ruins of dead colonies. But finally, they built something new. They built a ship, unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They called it the Revenant. The Revenant was not just a warship. It was part battleship, part mobile shipyard, part living fortress. Its hull was thicker than any Corvette vessel, built from layered alloys that could shrug off most weapons fire. Its engines let it move faster than anything the Dominion had ever tracked. And most importantly, it carried a secret weapon system, something the humans had built entirely on their own, something no alien species had ever seen. The engineers called it the Hammer Core, a weapon that could punch through Corvette shields as if they were made of paper. The Revenant's captain was a woman named Elena Voss. She had been a young officer during the Scattering, barely 20 years old when she watched her home colony burn from orbit, unable to do anything but run. She had lost her parents, her brother, and almost everyone she had ever known, in a single week of fire and death. That pain never left her. It hardened into something cold and sharp, something that made her one of the most respected leaders among the hidden human fleet. Elena stood on the bridge of the Revenant, looking out at the stars through the main viewport. Her crew moved around her, checking systems, running final tests before the ship's first true mission. She was not a woman who smiled often, but today there was a small, quiet fire in her eyes. After 40 years of hiding, of losing ship after ship, of burying friends in empty space because there was no home left to bury them on, humanity finally had something that could fight back. Beside her stood her second-in-command, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus Chen. He had lost his entire family too, though in a different colony, in a different massacre. Almost everyone on the Revenant had a story like that. There was no one aboard who had not lost someone to the Corveth. That was not by accident. Elena had chosen her crew carefully. She wanted people who understood exactly why this ship existed, people who would not hesitate when the moment came. "Systems are green across the board, Captain," Marcus said, looking at his console. "Hammer core is charged and stable. Engines are ready. We are ready to leave the yard." Elena nodded slowly. "Set a course. We are heading toward the edge of Corveth patrol space. It is time we stopped hiding and started reminding them that humanity is still here." The plan was simple but dangerous. For years, human scouts had watched Corveth patrol routes from a safe distance, mapping where their ships traveled, learning their patterns. The Revenant's mission was to slip into Corveth space, gather information about a nearby shipyard the Dominion used to build new patrol vessels, and if possible, strike a blow that would send a message. It was a bold plan, maybe even a reckless one, but Elena believed it was necessary. Humanity could not stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, the Corveth would find every last hiding place. Better to strike first, on humanity's own terms, than to wait quietly for the end. As the Revenant left the shipyard and moved into open space, other hidden human ships watched it go. Small scout vessels, cargo ships turned into makeshift transports, all the remaining pieces of a broken civilization, watched the Revenant like it was a symbol of something bigger than itself. For many of them, it was the first time in decades that they felt something other than fear. Meanwhile, far across the stars, inside the heart of Corveth space, the Dominion Assembly met in their great council hall. The assembly was made up of the oldest and most powerful Corveth leaders, cold and calculating beings, who had ruled the Dominion for centuries. They reviewed reports from patrol ships like Yultheth's, confirming again and again that humanity remained weak, scattered, and no real threat. The destruction of the hopeful dawn was mentioned only briefly, one line in a long report, already forgotten among 100 other similar reports. One member of the assembly, an old and respected commander named Thren Kolvath, listened to these reports with a small frown. Thren had fought against humans many years ago, back during the First War when Earth still stood. He remembered something the younger Corveth officers did not. He remembered that humans, even when losing, even when facing death, never truly stopped fighting. It was something that had always troubled him, a small worry buried deep in the back of his mind. The other assembly members mocked this worry, calling it old-fashioned fear from a commander who had seen too many battles. But Thren could not shake the feeling that somewhere out in the dark, humanity was still alive, still angry, and still dangerous, in ways the Dominion did not understand. He did not know it yet, but very soon, his fear would prove to be true. As the days passed, the Revenant moved silently through the void, avoiding known patrol routes, using stealth systems built from captured Corveth technology to stay hidden from long-range sensors. Elena spent long hours on the bridge, watching the stars, thinking about her family, about the colony she had lost, about all the people who never got the chance to fight back. She thought about Yultheth's victim, though she did not know its name. One more ship, one more crew, wiped away like so many others. On the lower decks, the crew trained constantly. They ran drills for battle, for damage control, for every emergency they could imagine. They knew that once the Revenant was spotted, there would be no turning back. The Corveth would send everything they had to destroy it, just as they destroyed every other human ship they had ever found. But the Revenant was not like every other human ship. It carried the hopes of an entire hidden species, and it carried a weapon that had never been tested in real combat. Deep in the ship's engineering section, the chief engineer, an older woman named Priya Patel, watched the hammer core with careful eyes. She had spent 15 years of her life building this weapon, testing it, rebuilding it after failures, refining it piece by piece. She believed in it completely, but she also knew that theory and battle were two very different things. Today, or very soon, they would find out if all those years of work had been worth it. As the Revenant crossed deeper into contested space, its sensors picked up a faint signal. A Corvette patrol ship, moving on a routine sweep, was on a path that would cross directly with the Revenant's position within the next few hours. Elena stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling the weight of the choice in front of her. She could change course, avoid the patrol, and continue the mission quietly as planned, or she could let the encounter happen and see for the first time what the Revenant could really do. She thought of every burned colony, every empty grave marker floating in space because there was no ground left to bury the dead. Every child who never got to grow up because a Corvette captain like Yultheth decided their ship was a threat that needed to be silenced. "Hold course," Elena said quietly. "Let them come." Marcus looked at her, understanding exactly what she meant. Around the bridge, the crew grew still, feeling the tension building in the air. Somewhere out there, a Corvette patrol ship was moving toward them, expecting nothing more than another easy kill, another line in a report, another human ship destroyed and forgotten. They had no idea what they were about to find. The Corvette patrol ship was called the Silent Fang, a mid-sized vessel with a crew of 60, built for exactly one purpose: to find human ships and destroy them before they could grow into a larger threat. Its captain, a sharp-eyed officer named Draven Kor, had served on patrol duty for nearly 10 years. In that time, he had personally destroyed 11 human vessels, 11 kills, 11 reports, 11 lines, added to his long record of service. He was proud of that number. To him, it meant he was doing his duty well, protecting the Dominion from the chaos species that had once fought so hard against them. When the Silent Fang's sensors picked up an unknown contact far ahead, Draven felt only mild interest. The signal was strange, harder to read than usual, flickering in and out like something was interfering with his scanners. He assumed it was simply old human technology, poorly maintained and barely functioning, the kind of thing he had seen many times before. He ordered his crew to close the distance and prepare weapons. Just another human ship, just another quiet kill in the endless dark. As the Silent Fang moved closer, its scanners finally locked onto a clear image of the target. Draven leaned forward in his chair, studying the shape on his screen. It was large, much larger than any human ship he had ever encountered. The design was strange too, a mix of shapes he almost recognized and shapes he did not recognize at all. For a moment, a small feeling of doubt crept into his mind. Then he dismissed it. Humans were creative in a chaotic sort of way, but they lacked the discipline and technology to build anything truly dangerous. This was probably just some new experiment, some desperate attempt to build a bigger ship out of scraps. It would burn just as easily as all the others. Target confirmed as human vessel, his weapons officer reported, preparing torpedo lock. "Fire when ready," Draven said calmly. "Let us end this quickly." On the bridge of the Revenant, Elena watched the approaching patrol ship with steady eyes. The crew around her were tense but focused, each person at their station, ready for whatever came next. Marcus stood beside her, watching the tactical display as the Silent Fang closed the distance between them. "They are preparing to fire," the tactical officer reported. "Torpedo lock detected." "Raise shields," Elena said. "Let them take their shot." A moment later, 3 plasma torpedoes streaked across the dark toward the Revenant. On the bridge, some of the younger crew members tensed, remembering stories of other human ships that had died exactly this way, torn apart in seconds by weapons just like these. But the Revenant's shields, built using stolen and improved Corvette technology, held strong. The torpedoes struck the ship's outer hull and exploded harmlessly against the shimmering barrier of energy that surrounded the vessel. On the Silent Fang, Draven's calm expression cracked for the first time. "Impossible," he muttered, staring at his screen. "That ship should be destroyed. Confirm target status." "Target is undamaged, Captain," his sensor officer said, voice tight with confusion. "Shields absorbed full impact." Draven felt a cold chill run through him, though he tried not to show it. In 10 years of patrol duty, He had never seen a human ship survive even a single torpedo strike, let alone 3 at once. He ordered a second volley, this time adding energy cannon fire to the attack, hoping that a combined assault would finally break through whatever strange defense this ship possessed. Elena watched the second wave of attacks hit the Revenant's shields. The ship shook slightly from the impact, and warning lights flickered across several control panels, but the hull held. Priya's voice came through on the comm system from engineering, calm, despite the tension in the air. "Shields at 82%, Captain. We can take a few more hits like that before we need to worry." Elena allowed herself a small, grim smile. For 40 years, humanity had been the prey, running and hiding from ships, just like the Silent Fang. Today, for the first time, the roles were about to change. "Marcus," she said quietly, "bring the Hammer Core online. Let us show them what we built." Deep within the Revenant's core, the Hammer Core weapon system began to charge, drawing enormous amounts of energy from the ship's reactors. Priya watched the readings with a steady hand, years of testing and preparation finally coming down to this single moment. The weapon had never been fired at a real target before. Every simulation, every calculation, every sleepless night of research led to this. On the bridge of the Silent Fang, Draven ordered his crew to prepare for a full assault, unwilling to believe that a human vessel could truly withstand his ship's weapons. He did not know that on the other side of the battlefield, something far more dangerous than anything he had ever faced was about to be unleashed. The Hammer Core fired. A beam of concentrated energy, thin and bright as a needle of pure light, shot across the space between the two ships. It struck the Silent Fang's shields, and, for a brief moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the shields shattered like glass, unable to withstand the concentrated force of the attack. The beam continued forward, cutting through the Silent Fang's outer hull, as if it were paper, tearing a massive hole through the ship's midsection. Alarms exploded across the Silent Fang's bridge. Draven stared at his screen in disbelief as damage reports flooded in from every section of his ship. Engineering was on fire. Life support was failing on 3 decks. His weapon systems were completely offline. "Status report," he shouted, his voice cracking with something close to panic. "We are losing power across the ship, Captain," his engineering officer reported, voice shaking. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 9. We cannot maintain shields." Draven stared at the image of the human ship on his screen, the ship that only minutes ago he had been certain would die exactly like every other human vessel he had encountered. Now his own ship was the one dying, torn apart by a weapon he did not understand and could not counter. For a brief moment, old memories surfaced in his mind. Stories he had heard as a young officer about the first war against humanity. Stories about how humans had fought with a kind of desperate fury that unsettled even veteran Corvette soldiers. He had always dismissed those stories as exaggeration, propaganda meant to justify the harsh policies of the Silence Edict. Now, watching his ship die around him, he began to wonder if those old stories had been true all along. On the Revenant, the crew watched the Silent Fang begin to break apart on their screens. There was no celebration on the bridge, no cheering. The mood was quiet, serious, almost solemn. Elena remembered every ship the Corvette had destroyed, every colony burned, every family torn apart. This was not a moment of joy. It was a moment of justice, long overdue. "Captain," the communications officer said quietly. "We are picking up an emergency signal from the Silent Fang. They are requesting a ceasefire." Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering her next move. Part of her, the part shaped by years of grief and anger, wanted to finish what she had started, to make sure that ship never returned to hunt another human vessel. But another part of her, the part that remembered why humanity had built the Revenant in the first place, hesitated. "Patch me through," she said finally. A moment later, Draven's voice came through on the comm system, strained and full of confusion. "Human vessel, this is Captain Draven Core of the Silent Fang. We request an immediate ceasefire. Our ship is critically damaged." Elena's voice was calm and steady when she replied, "This is Captain Elena Voss, of the human ship Revenant. For 40 years, your people have destroyed every human ship you found, without warning, without mercy, without a single moment of hesitation. Give me one reason why I should show you mercy now." There was a long pause on the other end of the comm. When Draven spoke again, his voice sounded different, smaller somehow. I was following orders, he said. The silence edict. Every officer follows it. Orders, Elena repeated quietly. My parents died because of your orders. My brother died because of your orders. An entire species has spent 40 years hiding in the dark because of your orders. She paused, looking out at the dying ship on her view screen. I am not going to destroy you, Captain Core. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I want you to go back to your dominion and deliver a message. Tell them humanity is not extinct. Tell them we are not hiding anymore. Tell them that the next time you find one of our ships, you should think very carefully before you open fire. She ordered her crew to stand down, and the Revenant allowed the crippled Silent Fang to limp away, its crew alive but shaken, carrying a message that would soon spread through the entire Corveth Dominion like wildfire. As the damaged patrol ship disappeared into the distance, Marcus turned to Elena with a serious expression. They will not just let this go, Captain. They will send everything they have. Elena nodded slowly, watching the stars through the viewport. I know, she said. That is exactly what we want. Back on the Silent Fang, Draven sat in his chair, staring blankly at the screen, where the human ship had disappeared. Around him, his crew worked desperately to keep the ship together, long enough to reach the nearest repair station. He thought about the message he now had to deliver to the Dominion Assembly, a message that would shake the foundations of everything the Corveth believed about humanity. For 40 years, the Dominion had told itself a simple story. Humans were weak, scattered, and no longer a threat. That story had just been proven false in the most violent way possible. Somewhere out in the dark, humanity had been growing stronger, building weapons the Corveth did not understand, preparing for a day they had always known would come. That day had finally arrived, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. News of the Silent Fang's defeat spread through the Corveth Dominion faster than anyone expected. Within days, the story reached the Assembly Hall, where the oldest and most powerful leaders of the Dominion gathered to hear Draven Core's report in person. He stood before them, still bandaged from injuries suffered during the battle, his voice steady, but his eyes carrying the shadow of what he had witnessed. The human ship destroyed our shields with a single weapon, he explained. It tore through our hull, as if it were nothing. We had no defense against it. If they had wanted to destroy us completely, we would all be dead. The assembly chamber fell into stunned silence. For 40 years, the Dominion had operated under one simple truth. Humans were weak, and any ship they built could be destroyed quickly and easily. That truth had just been shattered in front of everyone. Thren Kolvath, the old commander who had fought against humans decades ago, sat quietly through the entire report, his expression unreadable. When Draven finished speaking, Thren finally rose from his seat, his ancient joints creaking with the movement. I warned this assembly many years ago, he said, his voice carrying the weight of long experience. I told you that humans do not simply disappear when they are pushed to the edge. I told you that a wounded species, given enough time, will find a way to bite back. You called me an old fool, who remembered a war too long ago to matter. Now you see the truth of my warning. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some assembly members looked uneasy, while others still refused to believe that a single human ship could truly be a threat to the entire Dominion fleet. A younger assembly member named Vexa Thorn stood up, her voice sharp with confidence. One ship does not make an army, she said. Perhaps this vessel is simply a lucky prototype, a single powerful weapon built by desperate survivors. We should not panic over one incident. We should hunt this ship down and destroy it, proving once again that humanity cannot stand against the Dominion. Thren studied her for a long moment before responding. And if it is not just one ship, he asked quietly. What if this is only the first sign of something much larger? Humanity has had 40 years to hide, to build, to prepare. We destroyed every ship we found, but we never truly knew how many ships we did not find. The assembly argued back and forth for hours, but in the end, the decision was made. A large strike fleet would be assembled, far more powerful than any single patrol ship, and sent to hunt down and destroy the Revenant before it could cause any further damage. Thren, despite his age, insisted on leading the fleet himself. He believed that if anyone understood the danger humanity truly posed, it was him, and he refused to let younger, overconfident officers repeat the same mistakes that had already cost the Dominion so much. Within a week, a massive fleet of 20 Corvette warships gathered at a forward base near the edge of contested space. These were not simple patrol vessels like the Silent Fang. These were true warships, heavily armed and shielded, built for large-scale combat rather than hunting down defenseless human freighters. Thren stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, watching as the fleet prepared to move out. He thought about the years he had spent fighting in the first war against humanity, back when Earth still stood and humanity had entire fleets of their own. He remembered the fierce determination in human pilots even as their ships burned around them, remembered soldiers who kept fighting, long after logic said they should have surrendered. He had hoped, after 40 years of quiet victories, that humanity had finally been broken. Now he understood that they had not been broken at all. They had simply been waiting, rebuilding, preparing for a moment like this one. Meanwhile, far across the stars, the Revenant continued its mission, moving carefully through contested space, while gathering information about Corvette defenses. Elena knew that the message she had sent through Draven Core would provoke a response, and she expected that response to be large and dangerous. She used the time before the Dominion fleet arrived to prepare her ship and crew as best she could, running endless drills, reinforcing weak points in the hull, and testing the limits of the Hammer Core weapon system. Priya worked tirelessly in engineering, studying the data from the battle against the Silent Fang, looking for ways to improve the weapon's efficiency and reduce the massive amount of energy it required to fire. She knew that against a larger fleet, a single shot every few minutes would not be enough. They would need to fire faster, and they would need every other system on the ship working perfectly to survive. How long until the Hammer Core can fire more than once without a full recharge cycle? Elena asked during one of their meetings. Priya rubbed her tired eyes before answering. We have made some progress, but we are still limited. Right now, we can fire twice before needing a significant recharge period. If we push the systems harder, we risk overheating the core entirely, which could cripple the ship, or worse. Elena nodded, understanding the risk, but also understanding that they might not have a choice. Do what you can, she said. We may not get the luxury of careful testing when the Dominion fleet arrives. Word of the battle had not only spread through the Corvette Dominion, it had also reached the hidden pockets of humanity, scattered across the galaxy. Small resistance groups, hiding in asteroid fields and abandoned stations, heard whispers of a human ship that had fought back against the Corvette and survived. For the first time in decades, something like hope began to spread among the scattered remains of humanity. Some groups began reaching out through old, careful communication channels, offering support, offering information, even offering old ships and supplies that had been hidden away for years. Elena received these messages with a mixture of gratitude and caution. She knew that the more humans who learned about the Revenant, the more likely it was that word would eventually reach the Dominion in ways she could not control. But she also understood that humanity could not win this fight alone. If they were going to survive what was coming, they would need every scrap of help they could find. One particular message caught her attention. It came from a hidden human colony, deep in an asteroid belt several systems away, a place that had somehow avoided Corvette detection for over 20 years. The message was from a former engineer named James Okafor, who claimed to have access to 3 more hidden warships, smaller than the Revenant, but still built using stolen Corvette technology. Ships that had been kept in reserve for exactly a moment like this one. Elena arranged a careful, secure meeting with Okafor's people, and within days, a small fleet of hidden human vessels began moving to rendezvous with the Revenant. It was not a large force, only 4 ships including the Revenant itself, but it was more firepower than humanity had gathered in one place since the days before the scattering. As the human ships prepared for what was coming, the Corvette fleet, under Thren's command, finally departed from their forward base, moving steadily toward the last known position of the Revenant. Thren stood on his bridge, watching the stars pass by, his mind heavy with old memories and new worries. He had spent 40 years believing that the Silence Edict had done its job, that humanity had been reduced to nothing more than scattered survivors, too weak and too broken to ever threaten the Dominion again. Now he understood that this belief had been a dangerous mistake, one that could cost the Dominion everything if they were not careful. Sir, his tactical officer reported, long-range sensors have detected multiple contacts near the coordinates provided by Captain Core. It appears the human ship is not alone. Thren's expression darkened slightly. How many contacts? At least 4 vessels, sir. One matches the description of the ship that engaged the Silent Fang, the others are unknown. Thren was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display showing the small cluster of human ships far ahead. 20 Corvette warships against 4 human vessels. On paper, the odds still favored the Dominion overwhelmingly. But Thren had learned long ago that battles against humanity were never won on paper alone. Prepare the fleet for engagement, he said finally, but do not underestimate them. Not for a single moment. As the massive Corvette fleet closed the distance, Elena stood on the bridge of the Revenant, watching the approaching wall of enemy ships on her tactical display. Beside her, the 3 allied human vessels held formation, their crews nervous but determined. This was the moment humanity had been quietly preparing for, since the darkest days of the scattering. The moment when hiding would finally give way to fighting back. They outnumber us 5-1, Marcus said quietly, studying the numbers. Elena did not look away from the screen. They always have, she said. That has never stopped us before. The 2 fleets moved closer to each other, across the empty dark of space, both sides carrying decades of history, pain, and fear, toward a battle that would decide far more than just who survived the day. For the Corvette, it was a battle to prove that the Silence Edict still worked, that humanity could still be crushed before it grew too strong. For humanity, it was a battle to prove that they were not the weak, broken species the Dominion believed them to be. As the first ships came within firing range, Thren gave the order to attack, and the void between the 2 fleets erupted into fire and light. The battle began with a storm of plasma fire lighting up the darkness between the 2 fleets. 20 Corvette warships opened fire at once, filling the space around the small human formation with deadly energy bolts and torpedoes. Elena had expected this, and she had prepared her small fleet carefully for exactly this kind of overwhelming assault. Scatter formation, she ordered. Do not let them box us in. Keep moving. The 4 human ships broke apart, each one weaving through space in unpredictable patterns, designed to make them harder to target. The Revenant, larger and tougher than the other 3 vessels, took the lead, drawing much of the enemy fire toward itself, while the smaller ships used the chaos to strike at weaker points in the Corvette formation. On the Dominion's wrath, Thren watched the battle unfold with sharp, careful eyes. He had fought enough battles to recognize skilled tactics when he saw them, and what he was seeing now troubled him deeply. The human ships were not simply running or fighting blindly. They were working together, with practiced precision, striking and retreating in patterns that reminded him uncomfortably of old war records from decades ago. Concentrate fire on the largest vessel, he ordered. If we destroy their flagship, the others will scatter, and we can hunt them down individually. Corvette ships began shifting their formation, focusing their combined firepower on the Revenant. Elena felt the ship shake violently, as dozens of weapons fire struck the shields at once. Warning lights flashed across every console on the bridge, and the sound of alarms filled the air. Shields down to 60% and dropping fast, the tactical officer reported, his voice tight with tension. Elena gripped the arms of her chair, watching the tactical display as more and more Corvette ships turned their weapons toward her vessel. She had known this fight would be difficult, but the sheer weight of firepower from 20 warships was testing the limits of everything Priya and her team had built. Priya, Elena called through the comm. I need the hammer core ready to fire, now. It needs another 30 seconds to reach full charge, Priya replied, sweat visible on her forehead as she worked frantically at her station. If I force it now, we risk burning out the entire system. We may not have 30 seconds, Elena said grimly, watching another wave of enemy fire streak toward her ship. The shields dropped to 40%, then 30%, as the Corvette continued their relentless assault. On the smaller human ships, crews fought desperately against their own targets, managing to destroy 2 Corvette vessels through clever use of hit-and-run tactics, but taking damage of their own in the process. One of the human ships, a smaller vessel called the Second Chance, took a direct hit to its engine section and began drifting, unable to maneuver. Second Chance is losing power, Marcus reported. They cannot move. Elena's jaw tightened. She had known this battle would come at a cost, but watching one of her allied ships become a helpless target filled her with a familiar, painful anger. She thought of every human ship that had died exactly this way over the past 40 years, drifting and defenseless, while Corvette weapons finished the job. Redirect 2 Corvette ships toward the second chance, and I want everything we have on them the moment they get in range, she ordered. We are not losing another ship today. The Revenant turned sharply, its massive engines pushing it into a bold maneuver that put it directly between the drifting second chance and the approaching Corvette vessels. Enemy fire that would have finished off the crippled ship instead slammed into the Revenant's already weakened shields, causing the entire vessel to shudder violently. Shields at 15%, the tactical officer shouted over the noise of alarms. We cannot take much more of this. Hammer core is ready. Priya's voice cut through the chaos, filled with exhausted determination. Say the word, Captain. Elena looked at the tactical display, studying the positions of the 2 Corvette ships closing in on the crippled second chance. If she fired now, she could destroy both of them in a single devastating strike, buying enough time for the drifting ship to make emergency repairs. Fire, she said. The hammer core released its deadly beam of concentrated energy, tearing through the space between the ships with terrible speed. The beam struck the first Corvette vessel, cutting through its shields and hull in an instant, then continued forward with enough remaining power to strike the second ship as well, crippling it severely. Both Corvette vessels were forced to retreat, their crews scrambling to control the damage. On the Dominion's wrath, Thren watched the destruction of 2 more of his ships with a growing sense of dread. In all his years of service, he had never witnessed a human weapon capable of this kind of devastating power. He began to understand that this was not simply a well-built ship. This was something humanity had spent years, perhaps decades, preparing in secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Sir, his communications officer said urgently, we are receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Thren hesitated only a moment before nodding. Patch it through. Elena's voice came through the Dominion's Wrath's bridge, steady and clear, despite the chaos of battle happening all around her ship. This is Captain Elena Voss of the human ship Revenant. I know you can hear me, Fleet Commander. You have spent 40 years destroying every human ship you found, believing our species was too weak to fight back. Today, I want you to understand something clearly. We did not disappear. We did not give up. We simply waited, and we built, and we prepared for this exact moment. Thren listened silently, his old eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the ongoing battle. Around him, his officers waited nervously for his response, but he remained quiet, absorbing every word. You can keep sending fleets, Elena continued. You can keep trying to silence us. But every ship you send, every crew you lose, will only prove one thing to your own people. Humanity is not gone, we are not weak, and we are not going to hide in the dark forever. The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence on the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath. Thren stared at the tactical display for a long moment, watching as his fleet, despite its numbers, struggled against the small but fiercely capable human force. He thought about the warnings he had given the assembly, warnings that had been dismissed as the fears of an old commander clinging to outdated memories. Now, watching the battle unfold in front of him, he understood with painful clarity that those warnings had not been fears, they had been truth. Sir, orders? His tactical officer asked, waiting anxiously for direction. Thren was quiet for a moment longer before finally speaking. Continue the attack, he said, though his voice carried none of the confidence it once held. But prepare a full withdrawal contingency. If we lose more than half the fleet, we retreat and regroup. I will not throw away every ship we have on a battle we may not win today. The battle raged on, ship against ship, human determination against Corvette numbers. The Revenant's shields, battered and weakened, held on through sheer engineering skill, and desperate repairs performed in real time by Priya's exhausted engineering team. The smaller human ships continued their hit-and-run tactics, picking off damaged Corvette vessels whenever the opportunity arose, refusing to give the larger fleet a single moment of rest. Slowly, painfully, the tide of the battle began to shift. Corvette ships that had once seemed like an unstoppable wall of firepower were now falling back, damaged and disorganized, unable to match the coordinated precision of the small but determined human fleet. Thren watched his once mighty formation crumble around him, ship after ship forced to retreat or risk total destruction. He thought back to the ancient war stories from his youth, tales of human resistance that had seemed almost impossible to believe. Now, Watching his fleet struggle against a mere 4 ships, he finally understood the truth behind those old stories. Humanity had never truly been defeated. They had only been temporarily silenced, and now, after 40 long years, their silence had finally come to an end. As more of his ships fell back in retreat, Thren made the difficult decision to order a full withdrawal. It was not a decision he made lightly, but he understood that continuing the battle would only result in the complete destruction of his fleet, a loss that would be far more damaging to the Dominion than a strategic retreat. On the Revenant, Elena watched the remaining Corvette ships begin to pull away, their formation broken and their confidence shattered. Around her, the crew allowed themselves a brief moment of relief, though the exhaustion on every face was clear. They had won this battle, but everyone on the bridge understood that this was only the beginning of something much larger. Status of the second chance? Elena asked, turning her attention to the damaged Allied ship. They report engine damage, but no critical injuries among the crew, Marcus replied. They should be able to make emergency repairs and rejoin us within a few hours. Elena nodded, relief evident in her tired eyes. She looked out at the retreating Corvette fleet, watching as the last of the enemy ships disappeared into the darkness of space. For the first time in 40 years, humanity had not just survived an encounter with the Corvette Dominion. They had won. But she knew, deep in her heart, that this victory would not go unanswered. Somewhere far across the stars, the Dominion Assembly would soon learn of this defeat, and their response would likely be far greater than anything humanity had yet faced. News of the battle reached the Dominion Assembly within days, carried by Thren himself, who insisted on delivering the report in person, rather than sending it through normal channels. He stood before the gathered leaders of the Corvette Dominion, his usual calm composure replaced by something heavier, something closer to genuine concern. "We lost 11 ships," he told the assembly, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. 11 warships, destroyed or crippled by a force of only 4 human vessels. This was not luck. This was not a single powerful weapon used against an unprepared target. This was a coordinated, skilled, and determined enemy, fighting with tactics and technology we did not expect. The chamber erupted into heated discussion. Some assembly members demanded an immediate and overwhelming response, a full-scale invasion of human space to crush this threat before it could grow any further. Others, shaken by the scale of the defeat, began to question whether the Silence Edict itself had been a mistake from the very beginning. Vexa Thorn, the younger assembly member who had dismissed the danger only weeks earlier, now sat quietly, her earlier confidence gone. She had insisted that the Revenant was simply a lucky prototype, an isolated incident that could be handled easily. The battle at the edge of contested space had proven otherwise in the most costly way possible. Thren raised his hand, calling for silence, and slowly the chamber quieted enough for him to speak again. "I have spent my entire life fighting against humanity, first in open war, then in the long silence that followed. I believed, like many of you, that the Silence Edict had finally solved the problem our ancestors created when we first found their homeworld. I was wrong. We were all wrong." He paused, looking around at the gathered leaders of the Dominion, each one carrying the weight of decades of policy built on a single, flawed assumption. Humanity did not disappear because we defeated them. They disappeared because we forced them to hide, to adapt, to grow stronger in the shadows, while we grew comfortable and overconfident. Every ship we destroyed over these 40 years did not weaken them. It only proved to them, again and again, that we would never stop hunting them, unless they found a way to fight back. The assembly listened, some with anger, some with fear, and a few, including Thren himself, with something close to regret. For the first time in decades, serious voices began to question whether continuing the Silence Edict was truly the wisest path forward, or whether it would simply lead to a long, costly war that the Dominion was not fully prepared to fight. Far away, at the hidden human shipyard where the Revenant had first been built, Elena stood before a gathering of survivors, scouts, and resistance leaders from across the scattered pockets of humanity. Word of the battle had spread quickly through every hidden human community, carried by careful, coded messages passed from ship to ship, from colony to colony. For the first time since the scattering, humanity was not just surviving in silence. They were beginning to organize, to plan, to hope for something more than simply staying hidden forever. "We proved something today," that the Corveth Dominion needs to understand clearly, Elena said, addressing the gathered crowd. They spent 40 years believing we were broken, that we were nothing more than scattered survivors waiting quietly to be found and destroyed. We are not broken. We never were. We were simply waiting for the right moment, and now that moment has come. Among the crowd stood James Okafor, the engineer whose hidden colony had provided the additional ships for the battle. He studied Elena carefully, sensing the same quiet determination in her that had inspired his own people to finally step out of hiding after so many years. "What happens now, Captain?" he asked. "The Dominion will not simply forget what happened. They will come back, stronger and more prepared." Elena nodded, understanding the weight of the question. "You are right. This will not be the end of the fight. It may only be the beginning, but we are no longer facing this alone, and we are no longer facing it in the dark. Every hidden colony, every surviving ship, every scattered piece of humanity now knows that we can fight back. That knowledge alone changes everything." Priya, standing nearby with the rest of the Revenant's engineering team, spoke up from the crowd. "The Hammer Core worked, but we pushed it to its limits. If we are going to face a larger Dominion response, we need more ships like the Revenant, not just one. We need to combine every hidden shipyard, every scrap of technology and knowledge humanity has left, and build a real fleet." Elena looked around at the faces gathered before her, survivors from dozens of different hidden colonies, each one carrying their own stories of loss and quiet resilience. She saw fear in some eyes, but she also saw something else, something that had been missing from humanity for far too long. She saw hope. "Then that is exactly what we will do," she said. "We will build. We will grow stronger. And the next time the Dominion sends a fleet to silence us, they will find not one dangerous ship, but an entire fleet, ready to defend what is left of humanity." Back within Corveth space, the Assembly's long and heated debate finally reached a difficult conclusion. Rather than launching an immediate, full-scale invasion, the Dominion decided to take a more cautious approach, gathering intelligence, studying the human weapon technology captured from damaged ships, and preparing a much larger and better-equipped fleet before attempting another major strike. Thren was placed in command of this new preparation effort, given the responsibility of ensuring that the Dominion would not underestimate humanity again. Alone in his private quarters after the assembly session ended, Thren stared out at the stars, thinking about the long years of war and silence that had shaped both his life and the fate of an entire species he had once believed was beneath serious concern. He thought about Captain Elena Voss, a woman he had never met in person, yet whose words during the battle had left a lasting impression on him. She had spoken not with hatred, but with quiet, determined conviction, the same kind of conviction he remembered from human soldiers decades ago. He wondered, not for the first time, whether the Silence Edict had ever truly been the right path. Perhaps, he thought, there might have been another way, one that did not require 40 years of destruction and hidden suffering on both sides. But that path had already been chosen long ago, and now the Dominion would have to face the consequences of that choice, whatever they might be. Months passed, and the hidden human shipyard grew busier than it had been in decades. Word of the Revenant's victory continued to spread, drawing more survivors out of hiding, more engineers willing to share their knowledge, more resources pooled together from colonies that had once believed they were entirely alone in the galaxy. Slowly, carefully, humanity began to rebuild not just ships, but something even more important, a sense of unity and purpose that had been missing since the darkest days of the scattering. Elena continued to command the Revenant, now recognized across every hidden human community as a symbol of resistance and hope. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with battles yet to come, losses yet to be mourned, and challenges no one could fully predict. The Corveth Dominion was still powerful, still vast, and still capable of overwhelming force, if they chose to unleash it fully. But for the first time in 40 years, humanity would face that power not as helpless prey hiding in the shadows, but as a determined species, standing ready to defend its right to exist. Standing on the bridge of the Revenant, looking out at the stars that had once represented only fear and loss, Elena allowed herself a rare moment of quiet reflection. She thought about her parents, her brother, and everyone else she had lost during the scattering. She thought about every human ship destroyed over the past 40 years, every crew that had never gotten the chance to fight back. We are still here, she said quietly to herself, watching the distant stars. And we are not going anywhere. Behind her, Marcus approached with a small smile, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in a long time. The other colonies are sending word, Captain. More ships, more crews, more people, ready to join the fight. It seems the Revenant has become something of a legend already. Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile of her own. Then let us make sure that legend is worth telling, she said. Far across the galaxy, the Corveth Dominion prepared for what many now believed was an inevitable and difficult war, while humanity, scattered but no longer silent, began to gather its strength for the battles yet to come. The Silence Edict had been built on the belief that humanity could be erased through fear and overwhelming force. Instead, it had created something the Dominion never expected, a species that refused to be forgotten, growing stronger in the shadows, until the day it finally chose to step back into the light. And as the Revenant continued its journey among the stars, carrying the hopes of a scattered but unbroken species, one truth had become clear, to friend and enemy alike. Humanity was no longer hiding, humanity was no longer weak, and humanity, after 40 long years of silence, was finally ready to fight for its place among the stars.